If you've ever felt like there's too much on your plate, like you're juggling so many things, you're not sure what to let go of and what to keep holding on to, I've been there too. And I recently had a conversation with a friend who's feeling exactly that way. Now, she's ambitious, she's driven, but it's costing her more than she realized. She asked me a specific question. How do you know what to let go of and what to keep holding on to? But here's one thing. When you start from that question, you're starting from the wrong place. Today, I'm going to share how to shift from overwhelm to clarity using a powerful framework from David Bayer that goes deeper than just the to-do list or productivity hacks. It's about how your beliefs shape your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, and ultimately your results. So we're going to walk through the 5 primary drivers and how to create a new belief that fuels you and not drains you. Hey everyone, welcome to Real Influence. I'm your host, Joey Valancourt, your friend and fellow traveler on the path of authentic influence that positively impacts your life and the lives you touch. So part of these episodes, I like to just unpack what's happening in every single day of my life. Like what happened this past week that I can learn from? What did I help impart as knowledge to other people? So today's episode's a really relevant one and really timely because I just had this conversation this week with a fellow colleague, a fellow team member, and a fellow friend. And she's a very ambitious young woman who's got a lot on her plate. She's got a full-time career. She's got things at home going on. And then she's got multiple projects that she's taken on. And it's all part of her bigger vision. She wants to achieve more. She wants to do more. But now she's feeling the stress. She's feeling the overwhelm of everything she's taking on. And she asked me, how do you know when it's too much? And then how do you pick what to let go of? Because some of these projects are like your kids, right? It's like, how do I pick my favorite kid? But when you start with that question and where she was at in terms of she's very emotional right now, she's feeling a bit of stress, she's feeling overwhelmed. When you start to be in that state, you don't have powerful questions. You're not resonating at an energy that's going to evoke better answers, they're going to produce better results. So the real issue, it's not about choosing tasks, it's about the beliefs driving the feelings of overwhelm. So last year, many of you may or may not already know, but I actually invested in a coach. I think having a business coach is one of the best things you can do. Business coach, mindset coach, life coach, whatever it is in life that you want to achieve, find somebody who's done it and get mentored by them. And I had a world-class experience of just getting real life coaching in my life and had some transformations around that significantly impacted the way I live my life and what I experience in life. I'm going to do a whole other episode on that, but I also wanted to become a certified mindset facilitator in the same technology that was used to transform my life so that I could help other people. Now, my purpose isn't to actually become a coach. It was actually just to be able to become a better dad, a better partner, a better friend, and a better leader in all areas of my life so that I could help people by coaching them. And one key distinction is enabling is not coaching. So if somebody is spilling their guts to you, they're going through something and you're saying, oh, that's too bad, I can totally relate. There's a point you can empathize with people, but ultimately we want to coach people. We want to actually get them out of their own way. So I decided to enroll in the Mindset Facilitator program by David Bayer. And one of the big distinctions that he has is something called the 5 primary drivers. So I'm going to walk through that before I get into the 5 ways that you can transform this overwhelm and start to come from it different experience and different perspective to have a different result. Rather than thinking, how do I make this choice? We have to first change the core belief. Why is this the question you have? Why are you feeling this way in the first place? And then we can get the better questions. So I'm going to go through the framework right now. So your beliefs dictate your destiny. And it sounds cliche, but it's really behavioral psychology. The way it works is the 5 primary drivers are as follows. First, you have an initial belief, something you believe in life. And I'm going to give a practical example around a person who's making sales calls. Okay, so maybe this person thinks, I'm not that great at sales, or I'm just not good at sales, but they're in a sales position. They're just lacking confidence. So of course, they're going to have thoughts. First thing is beliefs. Second thing are thoughts. So I'm going to have thoughts. Nobody's going to want to talk to me. I'm not going to make sales. I'm not going to make my mortgage payment. I'm going to look like a failure. From that, you're going to have emotions. Emotions tied to those thoughts. Now you're going to be feeling discouraged, overwhelmed, stressed, frustration, sadness. And when you're feeling these things, then you're going to take action or inaction, right? So imagine the salesperson who knows he has to make a bunch of sales calls today, but the first thing he's going to do is go clean his garage, clean his desk, go get coffee, do anything but actually do the sales calls, right? So that's going to be inaction or action. But ultimately, when he gets on the phone, when he starts making those sales calls, he's going to have a result. And when he's in this state, we call it a primal state. So there's only 2 states of being that we'll get into in a whole other episode, but primal state and powerful states are the only two states you could possibly be in. So think about primal states as fear, anxiety, stress, overwhelm. And a powerful state would be joy, confidence, enthusiasm. So he gets on these calls and he's already resonating at a low frequency. He's probably slunched over a little bit. His tone of voice isn't the same as if he'd be a confident salesperson. So what's the result? People aren't buying. That then reinforces that initial belief and then continues to drive like a psychocybernetic loop. It's a perpetual cycle. So what we want to do is we want to isolate that initial belief. So first, it's important to realize that you only have so much evidence that this initial belief you started with, this limiting belief that in this case, this person's not good at sales, is because you've been so focused on the evidence for that in your life. If that's your belief, that's what you're going to tune into. So whatever it is you're believing, that's what's going to get activated in your field. Everything you're perceiving is going to fuel that belief. So the logical question is, if our beliefs dictate our destiny, how do we choose new beliefs? And David's methodologies has a 2 millimeter distinction. And that is that beliefs are decisions. Decisions can be made. So new beliefs, therefore, can also be made. So think about it this way. At some point in time, maybe you had a job you didn't like. You decided you're going to get a new job. At some point in time, maybe you didn't like the partner you're with. So you decided you're going to get a new partner. And you have contrast to see what you didn't like in those situations and what you would change in the next. But you made a decision. And when you make a new decision and you start to become more confident, more powerful, you're starting to find evidence. 3 really cool things happen. So the first is you begin to attract new thoughts and ideas that are in alignment with that new decision. Your perception changes and you begin to pay attention to people and opportunities based on this new belief and this new decision. The third thing is you start to have these coincidences in life. You all of a sudden notice people coming to you with opportunities. All of a sudden solutions, all of a sudden questions start to come up. That's not necessarily a bad coincidence, but it is a coincidence that only gets manifested through the right state of mind. So a lot of people get caught up though in the, well, I need to know, how am I going to do that? How am I going to be better at sales? That's the wrong approach. We actually want to start with the belief first, the new decision, and the how unfolds itself. And David likes to reference something in all his methodologies. It talks about this 2009 Harvard study where they brought in piano players and they measured their brain activity when they were playing the piano in a physical format. Then they took away the piano, had the pianist just close their eyes, imagine playing the piano, and the same parts of the brain lit up. And this was such a phenomenal discovery because what this tells us is that the brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. So when we make a new decision, we imagine the imaginary act of us being confident, finding evidence in our life for actually doing these things. We're activating that part of the brain and building it. And that's called neurosculpting. It's similar to forming a new muscle. It's a muscle of the brain that you want to start to form. And just like going to the gym, you don't just do it once. This is a daily activity. And the way we can do this is through something that David has, which is called the decision matrix. So it's a 3-step process. We'll go back to our sales example. The person who thought, I'm not good at sales. The new decision is some form of the opposite. So in this case, we're just going to make it really clear. I am good at sales, or I'm getting better at sales. Sales comes naturally to me. Once we have that new belief, we made that new decision. Now we have to start activating the reticular activating system. And what that is something similar to buying a new car, and it's maybe a nice red car. And you think that you're the only person that has this car. And all of a sudden you're on the highway and you start to notice red cars everywhere. That's not coincidence. That's just a part of the brain getting activated because you're tuned into that frequency. You've tuned in, you just put it in your perspective. You have a red car, now you see it everywhere. So we want to start to build the evidence for the new belief and the new decision. So what you're going to do is start to think back in your life. When was sales easy? Was there a client? Was there a day when it just came natural to you? You were in your flow state and you started making calls and it started to go really well. We're going to start to stack that evidence, and not just sales, but this could be something as simple as I'm not enough and I am enough. When did you have evidence for that in your life? You're going to practice this daily. This is going to become a new workout routine for your brain. And if you can't find it in yourself, you can be inspired by other people. Who else does sales come natural from? How is it that they're making these sales calls and being so successful, so confident on the call? Start to source evidence and stack it. So you're going to have 3 columns: limiting belief, empowering belief, and then your evidence. And you're going to do this daily, and you're going to take notice of every time you have new evidence. You're going to add it to your evidence log, and it's going to start to build that part of the brain to reinforce the new decision and the new belief And from there, you're going to have better thoughts. You're going to actually think about, well, how could I become a better salesman? Whenever you go to the calls now, you're going to be more confident in your ability, and you're going to have thoughts and emotions that are happiness, joy, confidence, eagerness, enthusiasm. And then when you get on the calls, you're going to actually take action. You're going to be smiling. You're going to be confident. You're going to be engaged with the customer, and you're going to have better results. It's going to reinforce and give further evidence for that new belief and new decision. So now that we talked about the framework of the 5 drivers, the 5 primary drivers, the belief system, I want to take you through 2 different examples. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the limiting belief. I recently had a conversation with a friend of mine who's also thinking about buying a new house with his wife. So he wanted to buy this new house and he didn't know how to come up with the money. He's got a business. He takes out personal income from the business. So it's harder for him to justify to the banks that he has enough quote unquote money because he takes a smaller personal pay probably. So his initial limiting belief, which when I was coaching him, I identified, I'm like, oh, I'll start here because this is the belief. It's that, money's hard to come by, but that didn't resonate with him. So we went more towards, no, it's just hard to come up with the money. Okay, got it. But that really wasn't the limiting belief. That was an extension of the limiting belief, which was deeper seated. So then I said, what would happen if you didn't get the money? What would that mean? And he said, I would let people down. People would have a different perspective on me. My wife wouldn't look at me the same. My image, my reputation would be affected. I said, got it. So it's not a problem of coming up with the money. It's a problem of how you're feeling. And something along the lines of, I am not enough if I don't get this house. I am not enough to be able to get this money organized. That's what was affecting it, which was leading to disempowering questions of, well, it's impossible to come up with the money. It's so hard to come up with the money. Those aren't necessarily even questions. They're just statements that he was having. But when we move and we identify that there's a belief behind that, let's work on the belief first. When is it in your life that you have evidence that you are enough? And he started to think back. And it was like, at one point, I had to renovate this house. I didn't think I could do it. And I did it. I'm like, great. Let's add that as evidence that you are enough and you've always been enough and you're always going to be enough. And all of a sudden, he started to light up. He started to have more confidence in it. And I'm like, did you always have money to buy a new house? And he's, no, actually, it was uncomfortable in the last one, but we ended up getting the mortgage and it all worked out. I'm like, great. So can we agree that it's always going to feel a bit uncomfortable going through any new situation in life? We have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable and know that doesn't go away. So this situation is really no different. And you've already proven to yourself in the past through your own evidence that it is possible and you are enough. So this next challenge, we need to approach it with the same amount of confidence, with this same new belief. And from there, you're going to have better questions. You're going to ask, how could I make this work? Who could I ask to help me piece this together? What could I do with my current investments in order for me to achieve my financial obligation to buy this new house? You move into a more confident state, you have a different energy, and you start to attract the answers that you're actually looking for only when you're in a positive state. So that's one example. The other example, back to the woman that I was talking about that has to pick between all these different projects. We haven't coached together. And she asked me, like, what should I pick? How do you decide what do you pick? It's not necessarily what do I pick? Like, how do I drop one project? I love them all. I want to do everything. It's what does it mean to you by not getting them all done? What does that feel like? And most oftentimes it comes down to some form of I'm not enough. It's not going to work for me. It's taking too long. Things like that. But those are beliefs that are then dictating the thoughts you're having. So the thought that I need to pick one or I need to make the best decision is stemmed from that limiting belief. So the first thing we need to do is identify what's the limiting core belief at the root of this decision that you're trying to make. So the next step, once we identified that, is we now need to move into the empowering belief. Okay. So just like we talked about with the gentleman who said he couldn't afford his house or it's hard to come by for the money. And he said, it means that I'm not enough if I can't get this house. I'm not going to be enough for my own life, for my wife, for my family, for what I want to build. And we found evidence to say, well, that's not true. That doesn't feel good. And when it doesn't feel good, we'll talk about this in a separate episode, but there's 2 states of being, like I said, primal and powerful. And when you're in a primal state, David's coached over 10,000 people collectively with all his coaches. When something doesn't feel good, it's probably not true. And that can be hard to hear for the first time because there can be an experience like you getting rear-ended in your car. The experience is you got rear-ended, but the story is separate from the experience. What does that mean to you? You could have 2 people experience the same thing, whether it's a job loss or getting rear-ended in your car. One person could get out of the car and be like, oh my God, are you okay? I'm so sorry. Like, did I do that? Like, they could take responsibility, or they could feel compassion for the other person. Another person could be like, what a jerk. How dare they run into me? And they could play the victim in it. So the story is separate from the experience. Even though something's happening, it doesn't mean that the narrative you're giving it is actually true. So when it comes to making decisions, we want to understand what's driving that. Like, what's the core belief? And if you think that you have to pick something, is it that you're not enough if you can't get them all done? Or is it taking too long? Like, maybe you had a timeline, you want to get something done by a certain date, but then it becomes, well, one of my core beliefs, I'll give an example. I think it's more coincided to what she's experiencing. Previous to working with David was, in order to be more successful, to make more money, I need to work harder, sacrifice, and basically outwork everybody else. That's the only way to get results. Because up until that point, that's how I did get results. I had more business, I had more success, I had better family and everything that I wanted to achieve. But I did it through hustle and grind. And it's kind of like driving with the brakes on. So then he's flipped the script and he said, what if the best way to produce a result is to spend less time on it from a relaxed state? And I'm like, well, that's not possible. He's play around with me on this one. Was there a time in your life when it was easy? Like, did it just come natural to you? Did something happen that you barely even tried and it was an absolute success? And I started to think, and I was like, actually, yeah, there was this one marketing campaign we drove and it generated like $1 million in a weekend, and it was super easy. They got it. So that's evidence that you don't always have to hustle and grind. And he's, what else? And we just started listing a bunch of evidence, but it was only when I started to come back to the actual belief that I was able to start to change my mindset around, how is it possible for me to work less and still achieve more? And where can I find evidence to reinforce and start that neurosculpting, building that muscle in the brain? So number 3, we're going to start to find some evidence. So back to this woman who's experiencing this overwhelm. How do I pick between all these projects? I would ask her again, what does it mean to you if you don't get them all done? Or why are you experiencing overwhelm? What does that feel like? What does that mean to you? And it's probably a form of, there's just not enough time to get everything done. That's a limiting belief. And as we know, we can make a new decision. We could say that everything's happening in the exact amount of time it should be, and you're in the exact place you should be right now, right here. So the new belief can be some form of, there's always enough time. The best way to produce a result is to spend less time on it in a relaxed state. I like to build these beliefs around positive language. So you want to avoid using negative language as much as you can in the new empowering belief. That's why I'm saying that there's always enough time and there will always be enough time, or the best way to produce a result is from a relaxed state and by spending less time on it. So we want to build that into a new empowering belief with positive language. And then again, I would ask her, when in your life did something get accomplished that took a bit longer? Well, actually, I was thinking about buying a house for a long time and it took a bit longer, but we got the house. Okay, got it. So it still happens, right? And if we were to relax into that, is there a chance it could happen faster? Sure. Is there a chance it could happen still at the same time? Of course. But wouldn't you feel better having that belief that everything's happening at its own time, in its own place, in the perfect ways? So we want to build that belief as much as possible and then move into the 4th step, which is find the evidence. Step 4 is having new ideas. This is when you can start asking yourself the right questions. So back to which one should I pick? When it's coming from a primal state, when it's coming from a disempowering belief that there's just not enough time, I can't keep up with this, there'll never be enough time, there's no way I can get it all done, there's no way you can be resourceful. There's no way you can come up with new empowering questions that evoke better results and better action. So now that we've established a new belief, we say that there's always been enough time, there is enough time, things happen exactly in the right amount of time. Some form of that. You can play around with it depending on what it is. It doesn't have to be perfect. And it doesn't have to be very specific to the situation. It can just be very generalized and broad. As long as it's moving you in the opposite direction of there's not enough time, there will never be enough time, to some form of the opposite. But now, when we feel confident that, oh gosh, this is happening exactly as it should be, there's plenty of time. Well, I've seen the evidence for it now. I've built the evidence. I've worked at the evidence. I've neurosculpted. Now we can come back with I'm relaxed. Okay, I'm enjoying this. This is fun. So what new questions do I have? What projects are most impactful in my life? Which ones do I enjoy the most? Could I get it all done if I were to hire help? Who could I look to that's already built something similar to me that could help me understand how to get through this next phase? So you still may want to cut some projects. You still might want to develop a different vision. And one of the things that we wanted to get clear on, we're going to do that in step 5, is actually the vision. So step 5 is getting clear on the vision. And this is something called also the 4D, kind of living the life you'd be living as if the wish was already fulfilled. And it can kind of sound woo-woo, so stick with me on this, okay? It's really practical and easy to start to accomplish. But there's been people that I've heard of who are trying to find like their partner, right? They're going on dating sites and they're going on all these horrible dates. And ultimately, they're not finding the person of their dreams. There's also people that are looking for a new home, but they're not finding the new home or the new job or anything like that. But it's most likely because they actually haven't defined what it is that they want. And when I say defined, I don't want to just say, I want to find a new home. I want you to think about the exact home you want. How many windows? How many bathrooms? What colors? What does it look like? How does it feel being in the house? You have to tap into all 5 senses, and you have to be able to see it in your mind so you can attract it. If you just say a house, if you just say a partner, if you just say a job, you're going to get bombarded with a bunch of different options. And ultimately, it's probably not going to be the ones you want because you haven't clearly defined what it is. So back to the example of the woman who's experiencing overwhelm with projects. What do you want your life to look like? Do you enjoy these projects? Like, do you see yourself, if you made all the money in the world and you only had to do a couple things, would you still be doing this? Because ultimately, we want to start to align with the vision that we're living today. I oftentimes say the life that you're living is the life that you're building. So if you keep hustling and grinding, even when you made it, you're going to be seeking to hustle and grind. If you're chasing money and then you make all the money, you're still going to be chasing money. You're not ever going to be fulfilled because you've aligned with the wrong core values and you don't have the integrity set right in your life. So I would ask her, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? And if you already accomplished that goal, what would you be doing? And if it's, I'd be buying more rental properties, I continue to fix them up. It's like, great. Let's enjoy that now. So let's approach it as if there is no rush to get all this done. We might have to scale back some things, and that's okay. There's plenty of time. There's always going to be enough time. But if this is what you'd be doing and you had it all made and you had it all done, how would you be operating? How would you be showing up? Would you be concerned? No, you wouldn't be because you had all the money, right? So once you start to tap into that energy and you start to be grateful for those things that you already have and that you're already doing because they are the things you're doing, then you're set. Gratitude will reset you. When you can operate from a state of gratitude, it's much more powerful than operating from anxiety and was it going to happen? Is there enough time? The other thing that could happen though, is you could have more clarity. You could actually define a vision and say, you know what? I realized that I wouldn't be doing this. This isn't something I want to do for long term. It's a means to an end, but ultimately I need to redefine my vision. I need to get crystal clear. And then once you define the vision, it's easy to let things go. It become clear to you. It's black and white. Hey, I don't enjoy doing this. But until we have that vision articulated and fully articulated across all different areas of your life, from your partner to your house vision, to how you're spending your days, how you're spending your nights, you can't possibly operate from a point of clarity. So that's step 5. So the takeaway here, it's not about having less on your plate. It's about changing the lens through which you see it. So if you're experiencing any type of overwhelm or any type of like big decision in your life and you're experiencing pain, frustration, anxiety, or stress around this, I invite you to revisit your beliefs. Start to look at what is the actual belief here. Is it there's not enough time, I'm not good enough, or some sort of other belief? And if you need coaching on that, we also offer coaching. My wife's an amazing coach, and we offer it through the Real Life Influence Coaching. And you can go to realinfluencenow.com to check that out. But you can go and revisit the beliefs, build the new belief, empowering belief, one that is making you feel confident and powerful, and then find evidence and operate from that vision. And then you're going to have coincidences, synchronicities, new questions, and new evolutions that would have never been possible by operating from that other state. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. This is something I use daily, weekly with people in my life. I recommend it to you all the time. And when I'm struggling, I go back to this as a fundamental. This isn't something that you do once. This is an always on evergreen journey in your life that you can use. And it's a tool. So we want to use this tool. And if you like this episode and you listen to it on the podcast platform, please leave me a review. I'd love to hear what's working for you. And if you like the show, and if you know any other episodes that would come to mind that you want me to dig into, and if you're on YouTube platform, smash the like button, subscribe so you don't miss any other episodes, and just drop me a comment. This is what I'm experiencing, but I'd love to hear what your journeys and what else has worked for you when you're experiencing this type of decision making or overwhelm or anything else you've learned from David or other coaches. So again, thank you for being here with me today, and I'll see you on the next episode.